You're listening to the 49 Carats podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and today I'm joined here with Chris. He's been on the pod a few times now, and I always love having him on because his commentary, his insight is so great. Chris, how are you doing today? Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Oh, yeah, everything was great, man. Good food. I love to cook. You know what I'm saying? I live here in Florida, so, fried up a good turkey and all that good stuff. So hope you had a good one, too.
Yes, absolutely. I did. All right, so let's just jump right into this. We're going to be talking about the 49ers defense and how they match up against the Saints offense. But first, let's talk about some 49ers news. As we know, there's always some of that. But because it's Friday, we do have some information on the injury status going into this game. So for the 49ers, it's pretty short list. We love to see that, especially given how, the first half of the season was for this team. So really on the doubtful side, we only have Eric Armstead. And I think it's important to note that he's not out, but doubtful is pretty much out. But he was seen practicing today, so at some capacity, he was just on the field. I don't know if he was limited or something. I didn't actually see that, but he was on the field with the rest of the team, and that's a good step in the right direction. So maybe we see Eric Armstead in the coming weeks. I know we've been waiting on that for a while. And then questionable is Deebo Samuel. He has been limited this week with a hamstring injury, but I would guess he's on the good side of questionable, but we'll just have to wait and see on Sunday. And for the Saints, they have a couple players out: safety JT Gray, defensive end Peyton Turner, and linebacker Pete Werner. And questionable, they have a few guys who I would imagine some of these guys are probably going to be back. Marcus Davenport and Cameron Jordan. So they get some reinforcements on their defensive line. And they have their guard, Andrus Peat, coming back. We'll talk about him in a bit. And running back Mark Ingram, as well as cornerback Marcus Lattimore. So if any of these guys listed as questionable come back, like, the Saints are also on the better side of health going into this game. So that could definitely play a factor in this one. And one thing I didn't mention about the 49ers, Samson Ebukam, who missed the last two games, he's not listed on the injury report. He's good to go for this one. So that's a good sign for this 49ers defensive line. We'll definitely be talking about the defensive line here in a bit as well. One thing I wanted to note, the Saints, they're currently number 10 on offense and number 12 ranked defense in the NFL. So they're pretty balanced. You would think with their record that, I feel like a lot of people are just counting the Saints out as like a bad team, but really they're not as bad as one might think. Kind of similar to the Falcons, like right before we played them. I feel like a lot of people were just, counting them out as a bad team, but look what happened there. And so really quickly though, just want to go over some stats going into this game that I thought were kind of interesting. You see here, these are the rankings for points per game. You'll see San Francisco is ranked 11th. They're averaging 23.6 points per game this season, but not too far below them are the New Orleans Saints. They're averaging 22.6. So again, you think Andy Dalton, not very scary as a quarterback, but still the Saints offense is, finding ways to score points this season. And so they're kind of middle of the pack there, but higher certainly than I would have expected them to be. And then a couple of stats that I put together here for the Saints. They are third in second half points per game. They score 12.8 on average in the second half. They are seventh in passing yards per game, 237.5. They are 10th in yards per game, 355.2. They're 12th in completion percentage. Again, kind of surprising given Andy Dalton, right? Not as bad as maybe we think. 13th in rushing yards per carry, 15th in rushing yards per game. Credit to Alvin Kamara there. 19th in third down conversion percentage, which is kind of, middle of the pack, kind of, you know, in the middle there, and then 22nd in first half points per game. So they don't score as many points in the first half than they do as the second half, hence them being third in second half points per game, but being 22nd in first half points per game. And then they are 30th in giveaways per game and 31st in interceptions thrown per game. And I think those last two are really important because there's not much give, I think, in what I'm looking at as far as their offense goes. It's not as bad as you would think, but they give the ball away. So just looking at this, what do you think, Chris, about this matchup and just like the Saints in general, and what they have on offense?
Yeah, I think you touched on some good things, right? So I believe that it's easy to say this, but I think that they're better than their record shows, being at 4-7.
Mhm.
What kind of concerns me about the matchup, especially from an offensive standpoint, is the fact that I think some of their issues can be corrected, right? It's not like systematic, if you will. As you mentioned, I mean, I think, as it relates to their points per game, their yards per game, they're ranked pretty solid, in the league. I think also something else that, in addition to what you mentioned, yards per play, they're like sixth in the league, right? In their red zone percentage is at 60%. So, and that's ninth in the league. So I think that really is kind of the tail of their team. What that tells me is, with their 12 interceptions, that some of their shortfalls are self-inflicted, right? If they play a cleaner game from a turnover standpoint, they could be a little challenging. I think that the tail of the game is going to really be about red zone offense, their offense versus our defense, of course, and then the passing game. And then lastly, interceptions. I think that if we are able to get them to, force Andy Dalton into drop back game, passing situations, or, the pass rush is able to make some stuff happen, I think that, that's going to be positive in that regard, because it seems as if they're not able to overcome some of those mistakes as it relates to turning the ball over. So that's really what kind of concerns me, but I know we'll talk some more about some other things too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also feel like one of the things that's kind of working in their favor for this game is the fact that, as I mentioned, they got some guys coming back.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of the reason why they haven't really been able to put it all together. And, as you say, they're a lot better than what their record would show. I think they've kind of been the victim of, some injuries along the way that have kind of, limited them and what they've been able to do. But some of those guys coming back maybe as soon as this week, so could play a role. Let's look at, and I'll just make this a little bit bigger, but let's look at the battle of the trenches here. So if you look at the Saints offensive line, you see that Ruiz is shown as their right guard here, but with Andres Pete questionable, I would think he's probably on the better side of questionable. He will likely be the starter if he is active. So they're getting the starter back at right guard. But if you look here, it looks like the left side of the Saints offensive line is where they are most vulnerable, which could be a good sign for Nick Bosa, who has recorded at least one sack in all but one of the 9 games he's been active for this season. Chris, what are you seeing from the Saints offensive line? Is there anything that is like any player that's gives us an opportunity to have a good matchup against?
Well, I was excited about Ruiz because he's like their lowest graded guy on PFS, FF, as I was seeing. I was thinking that there might be some opportunities in that interior to really cause some havoc and create some pressure in the middle. With him potentially, getting replaced as the starter was coming back, there might be still opportunities there, right? Getting his legs, getting into game shape, and being able to exploit that a little bit. I think that also the interior doesn't even. It's interesting, right? Because we are playing. We're missing our starters on the interior defensive line. But I believe that we have the matchups to be able to exploit some of that stuff. Charles Omeni, who is playing some great ball, creating pressures at a high rate. I think that Kevin Givens has been stout, and he's been able to make a name for himself in that rotational role. And in some respects, I think he actually made a couple starts actually in this year too, with Kinlaw and Armstead being out. So I really believe the interior of the offensive line can be exploited a little bit. I think it's going to be key on stunts. I think if we can create some stunts, I like to see Nick Bosa move around a little bit more from side to side. I think that we can definitely keep them on their heels for a lot of the game.
Yeah, which D'Amico Ryans has been great at, generating some of those stunts and using different personnel packages on the defensive line to kind of create those mismatches. So I'm excited for that. But you mentioned a guy that I am excited for, Charles Omenihu, who has been phenomenal this season. Here are just a few tweets, and I'll read them off for the audio listeners. But first tweet by my guy Jordan here. Charles Omenihu has 37 pressures on 252 pass rushing snaps this season. No player in the NFL with 252 or fewer pass rushing snaps has recorded more pressures than Omenihu this season. And then over here by Akash, Charles Omenihu is ranked third in pass rush win rate. That is by PFF. The only two guys higher on that list is Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa. The 49ers have two of the top three rushers per PFF's win rate. And then PFF Jeff over here says most QB pressures in the NFL over the last 2 weeks. Nick Bosa, who has 14. Von Miller, who has 14. And Charles Omenihu with 14. That is some good company to be in. And lastly, David here, he said after yesterday's, talking about Monday's game, after Monday's 8 pressure performance, by the way, that he had the most pressures of anyone in that game against the Cardinals. Charles Omenihu ranks 11th among NFL edge rushers in pass rush productivity. So he's not even playing that many snaps, I feel like. I mean, yeah, with Eric Armstead out, he is playing a bigger role, but it's just great to see what he's been able to do in relief of Eric Armstead, not being out there, because that's a huge loss for this line, as you mentioned, like not having both him and Kinlaw in the interior. But Omenihu has just been able to pick up the slack, and I'm sure even last week, when Ebukam was out too, he was able to, give some extra contributions, as we see with the 8 pressure performance. So I'm pleased with Omenihu, and I think he's gonna keep the momentum going. I think he's gonna be a guy who's gonna continue to be a factor on that defensive line. So I'm with you. I think there's an opportunity for the defensive line to cause some havoc against the Saints offensive line. But as I mentioned, Samson Ebukam not on the injury report, so the defensive line will have him back. But I've been liking what I've been seeing from Drake Jackson, and so the silver lining of when Ebukam was out was that we got an extended look of Drake Jackson. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I think he's earned some snaps, even with Ebukam back. He has 3 sacks on the season. He's very aggressive, loves to get his hands up. He tipped a 3rd and 3 pass. I think it was a pass to James Conner, ended up being incomplete because he tipped it last week against the Cardinals. So he's making an impact. So I would like to see him get some extra snaps, but I'm curious what you think about Drake Jackson.
No, I agree with you. And a couple of things real quick about Omenihu too. I think something that has to be noted as well is that he's getting his pressures from the edge and in the interior, which is awesome. So that's excellent. But as it relates to Drake Jackson, I think an unintended consequence as from some of the injuries that we have is maybe him getting some more reps at a higher rate. I'm sure that they would have gotten him in here and there, but I think to the level of which he's playing now, that probably wouldn't have been as pronounced if it wasn't for some of the injuries that we were experiencing. So, but he's been productive. To your point, I mean, I think he's had like at least three batted balls this year. Very athletic. I don't think that I've ever seen him, have any reps that he just, got owned or, made a mistake in that regard. So he's definitely learning and growing, and he's playing opposite of Nick Bosa. So I'm sure there's a lot of teachable moments that are happening there. I do like what's happening with Drake Jackson. And it's interesting because I I don't think he's getting the love that maybe he should. I think that definitely he's shining more than I think maybe some of the national media or even some Niner fans realize. So with the exception of like his batted down balls when his name gets called out in that regard. So I like him a lot. I think that it's going to be interesting to see him continue to get polished and refined. And I see him really taking a jump in the second year for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And so I wonder if D'Amico Ryans makes it a point to get him some extra snaps, because I would like to see it. But let's go ahead and talk about Andy Dalton. Okay. We talked about the fact that he's surprisingly doing better than one might have thought. Jimmy Garoppolo, for reference, Jimmy ranks 10th in completion percentage this season. Not too shabby. Who's right after him is Andy Dalton. He ranks 11th. So he's been, surprisingly efficient for the Saints. And last week against the Rams, he had one of the quickest time to throws. Yeah, quickest time to throws this season, 2.16 seconds last week against the Rams. And I know the Rams are in shambles, okay? I get it. They're probably not trying their hardest anymore, but I think that was notable, the fact that he can get the ball out so quickly, because that makes it hard for, defensive lines to get to the quarterback if they're getting the ball out that quickly. So with the 49ers having such an aggressive defensive line attack, it would not surprise me if the Saints try to do the same thing with Andy Dalton. Of course, if you guys recall last week's preview episode, I was talking about Colt McCoy. Actually, Colt McCoy, having just played against the Rams as well, had a very fast time to throw as well. I believe his was like, I don't remember, but it was very similar to Andy Dalton's. And I was thinking to myself, they're going to try to do the same thing against 49ers. And so this is something the 49ers have to be prepared for if they can just, and I think me and you talked about it, Chris, on Twitter. If the 49ers DBs can just cover off the line, you make it that more difficult for the quarterback to get the ball out quickly. So I think that's one of the keys for the 49ers defense to stop, Andy Dalton from being efficient.
I agree. I think they're definitely going to replicate. He's going to definitely replicate that approach. And definitely for the first two drives or so, Colt tried to do that last week, right? And then, the defense settled in. They, candidly, they fell behind in the game, and then they just went to the drop back game. They had to try to get back in it, so they kind of got away from that game plan. But to your point, yeah, Andy kind of, for Andy Dalton, circumstances he kind of went off last week, right? 21 of 25, 260 yards, 84% completion percentage. I definitely think that, they were trying to probably negate that pass rush. And I think that, I know I might sound like a little bit of a homer here, but, I think the Niners pass rush is stronger than the Rams pass rush. So certainly I think that they're probably going to take that same approach as it relates to trying to go against the defense. Slants to Olave, dump offs to Kamara. I think we have the linebackers that can cover, sideline to sideline, to kind of, put some pressure on those running backs. Certainly, I'd be curious to see, what the inside to outside coverage looks like and what those schemes look like from on the boundary, with them moving Olave around and everything. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see. I think that we do have what it takes, but I think it's key to the pass rush, though. I think the pass rush definitely needs to be on, and especially coming off such a good, big time win last week, against the Cardinals. Not letting off gas and just keeping it going.
Yeah, and like one thing we've been seeing in these last few games is that D'Amico Ryans, it's almost like he lets the opposing team kind of do their thing. Like, I'm not sure what his game plan is, but it seems like he's kind of just like, okay, let's just see what they try to do in the first few drives. And then come the adjustments, where whatever they were doing before, he's just able to shut that down. So
Right.
I have no fear about, what the Saints might try to do against the 49ers defense, because I just know that there will be adjustments. And, the one thing about Andy Dalton is he's been efficient. He's been good enough, but he does sometimes throw interceptions. He has a 2-for-1 touchdown to interception ratio this season. So there is opportunity for the 49ers defense to, capitalize on some turnovers potentially in this one. Let's talk about the Saints wide receivers, who Andy Dalton will be trying to get the ball out to. Quick reminder, guys, make sure you like this video if you guys have not yet. Appreciate all the love. We're so close to being able to monetize on this channel, so make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe. I appreciate it. All right, let's talk about Chris Olave, because you mentioned him just a little bit ago. They like to move him around, as you said. I think for the most part, like, he will see probably Charvarius Ward, but they do like to move him around. So as for Lenore, I feel good about Olave going against Lenore too, just because I've seen Lenore just grow in confidence, and I don't know if you're seeing it too, but I tweeted this out a little bit ago. Quarterback rating throwing against Diamador Lenore the last 2 games. In week 10, 42.4. Week 11, 56.3. Each of those games, he only allowed 1 reception, and I believe they were both for like 5 yards. So, he's becoming better right before our eyes. He's growing confidence. And so I like the challenge that, someone like Olave would give Diamador Lenore. I think this is a great opportunity for maybe a heat check or something like that. Just see if okay, you're doing great. Let's see what you can do against Olave, who I think the Saints are using him in a great way. Definitely that works for their team. So yeah, I feel good about that matchup. But I don't know about you.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that something that's not really talked about enough is how the way that the Niner defense is constructed, it's conducive to young, in my opinion, young corners to really gain that confidence, because you have the benefit of that strong pass rush, right? And working in tandem to be able to not being on an island for too long, regardless of what the coverage is, if it's man or if it's zone or whatever the case. So similarly to last year with Ambry Thomas, I think Diamador Lenore is just going to get, more and more confident as the year goes on. A thing about that real quick, a note about that, like, Ambry Thomas is like vanished. Like, I don't even know what the word is with that. You know what I mean? You don't really hear about him anymore, which is interesting after the year he had and the strong into the last season last year. Interestingly, because before the Diamador Lenore at the beginning of last year was getting some hype and he kind of went away. But at any rate, I do feel good about Diamador Lenore. I know some movement kind of happened a little bit when Charvarius Ward went down for I guess he was just winded or gassed last week. In Mexico City, he hadn't practiced during the week and was probably getting his lungs right and such. So, but I'm excited about that. I think that also I'm confident that regardless, D'Amico Ryans isn't gonna leave him out there, to flounder on his own, right? So we'll have different coverages, whether it's bracketing or whatever the case, to be able to provide him some additional support. But I think Diamador Lenore is definitely holding his own, and I think he's just gonna get stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of him not being left on an island, Tashawn Gibson and Talanoa Hufanga have been playing great, and I think that definitely helps, the corners out. But let's talk about a former, quote unquote, former safety really quick, Jimmy Ward, who has been playing at nickel corner since he came back from his injury. He has not forced an incompletion this season since playing nickel corner. So he is allowed in 100% completion percentage in his coverage as a nickel corner. Based on what we saw yesterday, because Jimmy Ward left the game in the 4th quarter, he's fine, but he left the game, and Samuel Womack took over. And yeah, it was towards the end of the game, and the Cardinals put in, some of their backups on offense. But I thought Womack looked great. And he's been great on special teams too. I know it's a different, it's a different game playing nickel than special teams, but I like what I see from Womack is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, why doesn't he just get an opportunity to start? I mean, I know to me, I'm like, okay, I know they just don't want to bench Jimmy Ward
Right.
because like they have to know that Jimmy Ward, he can't be the best nickel corner. Like I feel like Samuel Womack probably gives them a slightly better edge there because that's just not as great as Ward is as a player. That's just not his natural position, and he just doesn't look as comfortable there. So,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, let me know what you think about
Yeah.
Samuel Womack. Would you like to see him start over Jimmy Ward?
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like I think Steph Womack is a strong player as well. He's definitely got hustle, as you mentioned with his special teams play. And he also shows out, when he has opportunity to do so, and filling in at the slot. I think that would I like to, honestly, yes, for the sake of him getting more experience, similar to Diamador Lenore, getting younger and cheaper, and as bad as that may sound at the position, especially if he's not a liability, right? I think that to your point, real quick about Jimmy though, it's so weird. I think there's some politics into that, right? So
Yeah,
for
there
one,
has.
Jimmy's a captain, right? For
Yeah.
two, there's that saying. I mean, even Jameis just came out this last week that there's kind of like the unwritten rule that you don't lose your position due to injury, but that's kind of what happened with Jimmy Ward. You know what I mean? And I think three, I for whatever reason, for better or worse, I think that reputation of Jimmy being moved around so much so much in his early career, excuse me. Still people, in the front office remember that. And he's like, oh, he played corner and he did good. Oh, he played slot and he played well. Oh, he played safety and he played really, really well. So he's a chess piece. But is he really? So I think that it's peculiar because at the end of the day, you want to put all trust and faith in both Kyle Shanahan and D'Amico Ryans, but I think it's more so the politics that's keeping him on the field. To your exact point, like you can't just bench Jimmy Ward, but I would, if it wasn't for some of those other variables, I definitely think that Samuel Womack would be better suited, getting the needed experience that he has now. Because I mean, to me, I feel like the writing's on the wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
That
sure.
Jimmy's not going to be here next year.
Yeah, absolutely, and there definitely is some politics involved in it. I mean, we mentioned Tashawn Gibson, how great he's been playing. I think I would try to put Jimmy Ward back at safety
Oh, for sure.
in favor of him over Gibson. But but I don't know if we'll see that this season bearing some injury. But I do like Samuel Womack, so I do hope that we get to see him maybe get a few snaps a game. I don't know, but I like what I see from him. So it looks like he's developing nicely, at least even in the background. But let's talk about the Saints tight ends. Okay, they like to use a group of them. They got Juwan Johnson, they got Taysom Hill, they got Adam Troutman. And I don't worry much about tight ends being effective against the 49ers because the 49ers defense are holding tight ends to an average of 35.9 yards per game, pretty low. And they've also only allowed 2 touchdowns to tight ends this season. Both came in week 6 against the Falcons, um, which is crazy, but whatever. We'll
Yeah, it's
just pretend
frustrating.
that game didn't happen. But yeah, so I'm not too worried, I guess, about Juwan Johnson. He's not like a world beater. So what I'm a little more afraid of is Taysom Hill because he's not he is a tight end, but not really. They like to use him in a variety of different ways. Just last week against the Rams, he had 74 total yards, and that was after kind of underutilizing him a bit in the previous weeks. And so I would expect the Saints are like, oh yeah, we have Taysom Hill, like let's start using him again. And so I would think they try to get him more involved this week, especially against like the Niners, this tough defense that you feel like you gotta, find creative ways to beat them. So I feel like they might pull the Taysom Hill card this week. Back in 2020, when these two teams played, Taysom Hill had 8 carries for 45 yards. So all in all, I would say the 49ers actually did a pretty good job back then to, limit him. I remember Nick Bosa having a shoestring tackle and, things like that are going to be important in this game. You have to be prepared for the Taysom Hill package because it's not just one particular play. It's all kinds of different things that they like to do with him. So they need to be prepared for all of it.
No, I agree. And I think that coming down the box, the safeties are probably going to do some good work on the tight ends. Taysom might get his here and there, some nice catches and such. But, with coverage, and of course, we have the linebackers that, if they try to create mismatches, that can pretty much run with anybody. So, and of course, again, you have the safeties over the top. So I'm confident that we'll be able to bottle those guys up pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm not too scared of Taysom Hill. Like, it's always a threat, especially in the red zone. But another guy that, is probably more of a threat, the biggest threat on this offense is Alvin Kamara.
Well, for sure.
And the last time these two teams met, he accounted for 3 touchdowns against the 49ers. So in the Saints' last 3 games, Kamara has gotten 9 carries, 8 carries, and 12 carries. So not quite the involvement you would think, actually. So that was a little surprising for me to see. He does get at least 4 targets a game, so he is always involved in like the passing game, checkdowns, things like that. So I would expect more of that. But I feel like if that's all the Saints are going to try to do with him, I feel like the 49ers have seen their fair share of, talented quarterbacks that their teams like to involve in similar ways. We've seen teams try to run screens on this team, to kind of counter the over aggressiveness of the 49ers defensive line, but the 49ers always kind of adjust to that pretty well. So I'm not really worried about that. And also, one thing we didn't mention much about Charvarius Ward is that he's a great run defender as well. Just last week, he had 8 tackles, tied for his season high. He also had 5 stops, and so he was huge in the run game. Mark Ingram might be back for the Saints, but I mean, I don't know how much he's going to play or how big of a deal that will be. But I'm more worried about Alvin Kamara. But at the same time, I still feel good about the 49ers being able to defend him and limit him.
Yeah, I think that I have confidence in the defense as well, like with their running game and with him being out involved in the passing game. But Alvin Kamara is the one that I'm concerned with as it relates to their offense, right? Like if it gets going a little bit and it can open up things for other people like Chris Olave and then maybe even some Taysom Hill stuff here or there, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it'll be really interesting to see how they deploy the defense to stop the run. New Orleans is getting they're like 6th in the league at yards per play. To your point earlier at the beginning of the show, that's a lot of that is a testament to their use of Alvin Kamara. I think to your point about his last few games, I've seen him on and off the injury report, during practice and stuff. So I don't know if he's dealing with something or whatever, but yeah, so, if he is getting his health back, if he's getting stronger and such, I definitely, I think he'll be their focus. If we can make them one-dimensional as it relates to just using Alvin Kamara, then they're going to be, their offense will be in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of my keys of the game, right? Which it is in most games, is you got to stop the run game first. Anytime an offense has a good run game going, they're kind of able to work off of that. And so that's really the first key to stopping any offense, really. And especially in this one where they like to use Alvin Kamara. We know how dangerous he could be if he gets going, if the Saints, deploy him how we think they might. It can open things up for other guys, as you mentioned. So as Ronnie here in the comments says, make Dalton fold under pressure, make them one-dimensional. All right, so that's definitely one of my keys. Stop the run game first, whether that is Kamara and the occasional Taysom Hill carry as well. You got to stop those two. They like to use Taysom Hill on the third, fourth and shorts, things like that. So something to keep an eye on and always be keyed in on. The 49ers defense is holding their opponents to an average of 283.9 yards per game. That is lowest in the NFL. So I feel pretty good about the 49ers being able to stop, this offense as long as they can stop Kamara. Like I said, that comes first. But I also think another key for me is take advantage of turnover opportunities.
Yes.
As I mentioned, Andy Dalton, he's pretty efficient. He can get the ball to his guys, but he's also susceptible to turning the ball over. So whenever those opportunities arise, and maybe, someone like a Talanoa Hufanga can force those opportunities as he has so well this season, you got to make those plays. And then I would also say they have to play mistake-free on offense, because in my 49ers offense preview episode, I kind of warned everyone actually that like this game might not be as easy for the offense as one might think. Like I actually feel like the Saints defense is not as bad as some might think. Certainly better than their record would indicate. And as I said, they're getting some guys back potentially on that defensive line, which could be huge for them. And Marshawn Lattimore could possibly be coming back too. So, those are some key guys, important guys. And so I think it might be a little tougher for Jimmy Garoppolo this week, but I think there will be opportunities in the run game. So they have to play mistake-free, make sure that, the turnover differential is favorable to the 49ers.
I agree. And then something I failed to mention earlier when you were talking about, where there was some susceptibility on the offensive line or on the offense in general. I mean, New Orleans has given up, they've surrendered 32 sacks this year so far. And, we've had, as a defense, 25 sacks so far this year. So I think there are opportunities there. When you're looking at the, tail of the tape or the statistics and such, I think the story is that when New Orleans falls, when they get out of their game and they have to drop and they're in the drop back game, it's typically when mistakes have happened for them, regardless of who's playing at quarterbacks. I know they've had a few throughout this year, in which case they will turn the ball over. They'll give you the ball. They'll be susceptible to sacking the quarterback, getting sacked because they can't get the ball out fast enough. So I think all your keys that you mentioned, you nailed them. I'm really interested to see again what the red zone matchup will look like. I think that will be, it might sound like stating the obvious, but considering how strong, that's a strength of theirs as an offense, is how they are in the red zone. And it's not exactly our greatest strength as a defense. If we can, keep them out of the red zone, or, be able to, step up, our red zone defense, we'll have, definitely have more success in this game. I think that also something that we are I think this is the third, the Cardinals game was the third game in a row in which, the defense didn't surrender any points in the second half. That's not going to last forever, right? So, we're going to regress in the mean a little bit, but, I believe that whatever it is, to your point earlier, D'Amico gets stronger as the game goes on. It's crazy. The defense does as well, though. I think they're conditioned to do that also. So I think that, despite, the Saints, being a stronger second half team, they're not putting up crazy numbers in the second half either. So, I think that, there are some intriguing matchups, right, as it relates to their strengths and our weaknesses and just strengths that they have in general. But I think the big difference is, just the overall, yards per game that the Niners are giving up on defense. There's a pretty big difference between that and how they're doing as an offense, but they're still in the top third of the league. So, it's really important for us to get after the quarterback, because they'll give up those sacks. To your point, they're going to give you the ball and ensure that, you capitalize on those turnovers.
Yeah, and I mean, surprisingly, actually, the Cardinals were kind of on the same boat last week, where they were a second half team as well, and they scored most of their points in the second half. And, we saw another shutout by the defense. So I actually feel good about that shutout continuing, but, I I do agree that there could be some regression there at some point.
Yeah, I'm cool with a couple field goals. That's no big deal.
Yeah, I'll take that. And the 49ers defense, I think, like, they've been pretty good at bend don't break in the red zone. So I think they're gonna keep that up. My score prediction is 17-10. I think it'll be a surprisingly lower scoring game, and I think it's gonna be closer, than some may think. But I think the 49ers will get they'll have the edge. They should. They are the more talented team at the end of the day. Um, they have something going right now, and I think when they do get going, they are hard to stop. So the Saints are going to give them a bit of a challenge, but I think the 49ers are going to be able to win regardless. 17-10. What about you, Chris?
28-14. So I think that I think we're going to keep up with the offensive production that we've, seen since Christian McCaffrey has joined the team. It hasn't all been necessarily attributed to him, but I think it does open some things up, right? Jimmy being more comfortable, having another outlet. Jimmy, the number of turnover-worthy plays that Jimmy's had has dropped, tremendously. And I think that, it's going to open up the offense. We're going to continue to open the offense up, and also build upon, this winning streak that we have. I think that Shanahan is getting more comfortable as well, though. You see what I mean? Like, it's interesting watching these games, right? And seeing the how he was stacking these plays in this last game in particular, in the drives and the play calls. The execution was there as well, obviously, but just some of the design of those plays and just knowing that those were the ones that he had scripted out to go successively after one after another. I think we're going to continue to see that. I don't know if we're going to put up as many points as we did, against the Cardinals, but I think that we're going to definitely put some more points up on the board than we were doing before Christian McCaffrey showed up, because of the benefits overall to the offense. And also, offensive line has been playing well. So I think, when Jimmy has his time and he's being kept clean, we've seen that Jimmy can be very efficient.
Yeah, my brother here. Shout out my brother. He's in the comments.
Hey,
Fabio says Niners 30, Saints 14. So he thinks the offense is going to keep it going too. Ronnie here says, does Kyle keep Elijah Mitchell fresh for the second half like he did Monday night? I thought that was an interesting kind of dynamic and running back split that he has going with Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell. And it seems very intentional, because in the Chargers game, Elijah Mitchell's first game back, it was almost like he was forced to use Elijah Mitchell a little bit more, because the Chargers were focused on Christian McCaffrey so much. But in that way, he kind of found like a really good 1-2 punch, I think, with the two of them. And he was like, oh, I kind of like this, and kind of deployed that similar attack against the Cardinals, where it was more so Christian McCaffrey in the first half, using him as a check down option, using him as a, receiver. And in the second half, it was Elijah Mitchell, the bully ball running back, who kind of is your closer and, plays that smash mouth football. So I don't know. I feel like we do see it again. It would definitely be interesting.
I agree. It's interesting. Like, during the last game, first half, I tweeted out I did a tweet. I was like, "Where's Elijah Mitchell? Like, is he hurt that we didn't know about? Is something happened?" And to me, I thought that was by design. I thought maybe because, and I didn't hear Shanahan say anything to this extent, but I thought maybe because of the altitude and so on and so forth, he was like, "All right, we're gonna have McCaffrey in there, get him gassed, wear down, and then we're gonna have Elijah Mitchell come in, and then fresh legs, and then he did it. Then McCaffrey came in, and honestly, to me, especially given the environment, Mexico City, I thought that was a perfect game plan. I think that was excellent. But honestly, I think that we should replicate that, moving forward, right?
Me too.
And there might be some. Yeah, and there might be even some ways of stacking that. Whereas, even after big plays or whatever, McCaffrey stayed in the game, then Elijah Mitchell came out later on when maybe McCaffrey needed a breather. I think that there are opportunities, say, McCaffrey, goes for 17 yards or 20 yards or whatever. boom, put McCaffrey. I'm sorry, put Elijah Mitchell in there right afterwards. You know what I'm saying? Fresh legs, fresh set of lungs, or whatever the case. And then you can even intermingle it like that. They can spell each other, not just Elijah Mitchell spelling McCaffrey. So I do like that distribution. More so how we did it in Mexico City as opposed to the Chargers game. So that was good too.
Yeah, I agree. And then a couple questions really quickly here before we head out. We do have to go to sleep. It's almost 11. I know it's later where you're at,
Oh, it's all
Chris.
good.
So we'll knock these out really quick. Ronnie says, "What's your thoughts on Jordan Mason getting his shot over TDP? Is it anything to read into?" I loved seeing Jordan Mason, so I don't care who he had to leap over on the depth chart to get there, but I loved seeing Jordan Mason. We've all been waiting for this moment. So I don't know if it's really anything to read into. I'm not. It was the first time we've really seen Jordan Mason at all in a regular season game, so I was excited about it more so than wondering what it was about. So I
No,
don't know
I
about you.
agree. Yeah, you never know. I think as we've come to see, it's either consistency in practice or whatever. Sometimes rookies have a short leash. So, what Kyle Shanahan has relates to his patience and such. So I'm not sure there's anything to to read into too much, or it just may have been his time. You know what I mean? So we'll see. If it persists, then there's going to be some questions.
Yeah. And then Kelts here, might the travel altitude and weather factor into the 49ers energy and efficiency? That's a great question. Also, somewhat of a short week for the 49ers. So they've had a pretty light practice week, given also the holiday. So I know Kyle Shanahan did say that he loved the practice they had today, Friday. So I don't know if that'll factor into it. If anything, I think it would help the 49ers
Right.
if they're still on that
Yep.
high of playing in the altitude, and they have that endurance and stamina from being
Yep.
there. I don't know really how long that lasts, but because they're been back at sea level, almost for a week now. But yeah, I think it might help if anything.
No, I agree. You see a lot of long distance runners travel and practice in high altitude, so that when they run at sea level, they're at even better conditions. So worst case, it'd be a positive.
Yeah. My brother says 3 straight home games. Are the Saints the one team we shouldn't overlook? I think so. And if you look at my previous video, it was the offense preview video. That was the title of my episode because I think a lot of fans are kind of chalking this up as a win, and I'm like, hold on, they're actually not that bad. So yeah, I definitely feel like the Saints are a team we can't overlook. And definitely, you guys, if you haven't checked that one out, check out my previous video previewing the 49ers offense against the Saints defense and how they match up. Paul here says, great content. You deserve a bigger audience. Thank you so much, Paul. Guys, if you agree, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. That is all we have for you guys today, and I really appreciate it. I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving, and I hope you guys enjoy. Oh my God, hold on. I'm trying to get rid of this. Here we go. I hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you guys after the game for my instant reaction episode. Have a good rest of your night. Peace.